Stop everything you're doing right now, because what I'm about to tell you could mean the difference between having food on your table next month or staring at empty cupboards wondering how you're going to feed your kids. If you or anyone you know depends on SNAP benefits, the ground just shifted beneath your feet, and most people have no idea it's happening. 42 million Americans are about to face changes so massive that food banks are already preparing for what they're calling a potential catastrophe, and the clock is ticking faster than anyone wants to admit. Before we go any further, smash that subscribe button, because this information could literally save your family, and you need to stay updated on every twist and turn of what's coming. Here's what nobody's telling you about what just happened. While everyone was distracted by the daily news cycle, Trump dropped a bombshell that's going to reshape how nearly 1 in 8 Americans eats. We're not talking about minor adjustments or bureaucratic paperwork changes. We're talking about a complete transformation of the safety net that's kept millions of families from falling into hunger for generations. And here's the part that should terrify you. Most of the people who are going to be affected have absolutely no idea what's headed their way. They're going to wake up one morning, check their EBT card balance, and discover their entire world has changed overnight. Let me paint you a picture of what's really at stake here. Think about Maria, a single mom working 2 part-time jobs because neither employer will give her full-time hours and risk having to provide benefits. She comes home exhausted every night, barely making minimum wage, but she's doing everything society tells her to do. She's working, she's trying, she's not asking for charity. She just needs a little help to make sure her 7-year-old daughter doesn't go to bed hungry. SNAP benefits give her an extra $190 a month to buy groceries. That's it, not luxury items, not steaks and lobster like the stereotypes suggest. We're talking about rice, beans, pasta, some chicken, maybe fresh vegetables if they're on sale. But under these new rules, Maria might not qualify anymore because the income threshold is dropping, or she might be told she's not working enough hours even though she's literally working every shift she can get. What's she supposed to do? Work a third job? Who's going to watch her daughter while she does that? Now multiply Maria's story by 42 million, and you're starting to understand the scale of what we're dealing with. But it gets worse, and I mean so much worse than you think. The work requirement changes aren't just asking people to get jobs. They're demanding that able-bodied adults work 30 hours per week or lose everything. Sounds reasonable until you dig into the reality. Do you know what happens when millions of people are suddenly required to prove they're working 30 hours weekly? The system gets overwhelmed. People who are working can't get their paperwork processed in time. People who want to work can't find employers willing to give them exactly 30 hours. And people who are dealing with health issues that don't quite meet the disability threshold get crushed in the middle. We've seen this movie before in states that implemented similar requirements, and the results were devastating. People didn't magically find better jobs. They just lost their food assistance and ended up in emergency rooms because malnutrition makes every health condition worse. But here's where this gets really twisted, and I want you to pay close attention because this is the part that should make your blood boil. The people pushing these changes keep talking about fraud and abuse in the system. They throw around images of people living large on government benefits, driving fancy cars, buying luxury items with EBT cards. It makes for great political theater, but the actual data tells a completely different story. The fraud rate in SNAP is less than 1%. 1%, that's actually one of the lowest fraud rates of any government program in existence. The average benefit is $6.30 per person per day. Try feeding yourself on that for a week and tell me how luxurious it feels. Most recipients are on the program for less than 10 months before they get back on their feet. This isn't a system full of lazy people gaming the system. It's a temporary lifeline for people experiencing hard times, and the statistics prove it beyond any shadow of doubt. Now let's talk about something that's going to blow your mind, because when I found this out, I couldn't believe what I was reading. These benefit cuts aren't just cruel to individuals. They're economically stupid on a level that defies comprehension. Every single dollar spent on SNAP generates $1.50 in economic activity. That means SNAP isn't just feeding people, it's feeding the economy. When you cut benefits, you're not just taking food away from families. You're taking money away from grocery stores, which means they lay off workers. You're taking money away from farmers, which means they produce less. You're creating a downward spiral that hurts everyone, including people who never received benefits in the first place. The grocery store in your neighborhood that's barely hanging on? Cutting SNAP could be what forces it to close, and then everyone in that community has to travel farther to buy food, which means higher costs for everyone. It's like setting your house on fire to stay warm. Sure, you'll be warm for a minute, but then you won't have a house. And we haven't even gotten to the most insidious part of these changes yet. The new restrictions on what foods can be purchased with SNAP benefits sound good in a press release. Who doesn't want people eating healthier, right? But dig deeper and you'll find a nightmare of unintended consequences that reveals how disconnected policymakers are from the reality of poverty. They want to restrict certain foods and only allow what they consider nutritionally dense options. Sounds great until you realize that fresh fruits and vegetables spoil quickly, which is a massive problem if you don't have reliable transportation to get to the store frequently or if you're working multiple jobs and can't cook elaborate meals every day. Those frozen dinners and canned soups they want to restrict? For many families, those are survival foods. They're affordable, they last, and a kid can heat them up after school when mom and dad are still at work. But bureaucrats who've never missed a meal in their lives think they know better than poor people about how to stretch a food budget. Let me hit you with some numbers that should shake you to your core. In the wealthiest nation in human history, over 10 million children live in food-insecure households right now, today, before these cuts even take effect. 10 million kids who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Teachers across America keep snacks in their classrooms because they know some students haven't eaten since lunch yesterday. School nurses see kids with stomach aches that turn out to be hunger. This isn't happening in some distant developing country. This is happening in your community, in your child's school, in the house down the street with the lawn that's a little overgrown because the family is working so much they don't have time to mow it. And now we're about to make it exponentially worse by cutting the very program that's keeping those numbers from being even higher. But wait, because there's a plot twist in this story that's absolutely jaw-dropping. Remember how Trump's base is largely in rural America and the South? Well, those are the exact regions with the highest SNAP participation rates. Counties that voted overwhelmingly for Trump have some of the highest percentages of residents receiving food assistance in the entire country. Kentucky, Mississippi, Louisiana, West Virginia, these states are going to be absolutely hammered by these changes. The people who celebrated his election are about to discover that the policies they voted for are going to take food out of their own mouths. It's political self-destruction on a massive scale, and the tragedy is that by the time people realize what's happened, it'll be too late to stop it. Now here's what keeps me up at night, and it should terrify you too. The timeline for these changes means they could start rolling out in as little as 6 months. 6 months. That's not enough time for 42 million people to completely restructure their lives. That's not enough time for states to build the infrastructure needed to process all the new work requirement verifications. That's not enough time for food banks to prepare for the tidal wave of need that's coming. Food bank directors I've spoken with are already panicking because they're operating at capacity right now. They don't have the resources to handle millions more people suddenly needing emergency food assistance. Churches, community organizations, nonprofits, they're all about to be overwhelmed, and there's no cavalry coming to save the day. And you want to know the really sick part? This is all being sold as helping people. The narrative is that tough love will push people towards self-sufficiency, that cutting benefits will motivate people to work harder and pull themselves up by their bootstraps. It's a beautiful story except for one tiny problem. It's a complete fantasy that's been disproven by decades of research. When you cut food assistance, people don't suddenly find better jobs. They just go hungry while working the same low-wage jobs they already had. Their kids' test scores drop because hungry children can't concentrate. Their health deteriorates because you can't maintain a body on inadequate nutrition. They end up in emergency rooms because untreated health conditions spiral out of control. And guess what? Emergency room visits cost taxpayers way more than SNAP benefits ever did. We're not saving money. We're just shifting costs to more expensive parts of the system while inflicting maximum suffering in the process. Let me tell you what's going to happen if these changes go through exactly as proposed. Within the first 3 months, emergency rooms are going to see a spike in visits for malnutrition-related issues. Within 6 months, schools are going to report increased behavioral problems because hungry kids act out. Within a year, we're going to see a measurable increase in preventable deaths related to inadequate nutrition, particularly among elderly people who fall through the cracks of the new system. Crime rates will tick up because desperate people do desperate things when their children are starving. Property values will decline in affected areas as communities destabilize. And through it all, the politicians who created this disaster will shake their heads and wonder why poverty isn't decreasing despite their brilliant policies. So what are you supposed to do with this information? First, understand that this isn't inevitable. These are proposed changes that still have to go through regulatory processes. That means there's a window for public comment, for pressure on representatives, for organization and resistance. If you receive SNAP benefits, start documenting everything right now. Every hour you work, every expense you have, every piece of paper related to your benefits, keep it all because you may need to fight for your assistance. Connect with advocacy organizations in your area because they're going to be on the front lines of this battle. Contact your representatives and make noise, lots of noise, because politicians respond to pressure, especially when elections are coming up. Talk to your neighbors, your coworkers, your family members about what's coming because the only way to stop this is if enough people understand what's at stake and demand better.